asked you.
It's not all just sheep here. Welcome to Wales. Now, before going to Portmeirion, you can't come to Wales without going up Mount Snowdon. And who's going to walk up a massive hill when you can spend 80 quid to go up there on a train instead? £80 return, it doesn't even take you to the bloody top. Ridiculous. Anyway, you can still walk the rest of the way up if you want to. However, it was far too windy and we needed a fag break, so we just went from this angle instead. There was no point in walking up any further. There were other things to do. Of course, there's always rumours about sheep in Wales, but here they are, in the middle of the road. How did he get out? They're also hanging around outside the church as well. Someone's lost their lovers. I obviously mean the other sheep. I'm not implying anything about the Welsh people. That would be rude. Anyway, enough of this. Let's go see what white people do when they're rich and bored. Let's go to Portmeirion, where you're greeted by a mermaid, hopefully not like the one in my video yesterday. And there's Mr. Saintharrison trying to look around and find out where the hell we're meant to be going. Portmeirion wasn't just built for the Prisoner TV series. It was created by Sir Bertram Clough William Ellis. How many names do you need? The setting for the tourist village had previously been an estate called Aberlar, which means the ice estuary in Welsh. The estate had been developed from an 18th century foundry and boatyard. The changing of the name occurred when the architect, I'm not reading all his names out again, took interest in the location in the early 1920s, and the word port referring to its position on the coastline, imagine that, and Meirion taken from the country of Merioneth, and the two put together, and it's been used ever since. In 1925, the famous architect with too many names began designing the village, incorporating elements of Italian architecture and design in his buildings and the constructions of squares and gardens. Some have speculated that the design was based on the famous fishing village of Portofino. However, he said he simply wanted to capture the atmosphere of the Mediterranean, and he certainly accomplished that. In 1926, the village opened its doors to the general public, who were greeted with an awe-inspiring design transporting the Mediterranean colours and ambience to the Welsh coastline. The village, although compact, includes a variety of different features, including Riviera-style houses, open spaces, ornamental gardens and Italian piazzas dotted around this unique setting. The man with many names contribution can be noted in his use of arches and different angles, and his experimentation of sizing, which gives the impression of the village being much larger than it actually is. The attention to detail in both design, architecture and the use of outdoor space is exemplary. You can tell I'm reading this from somewhere else. The tourist destination is based on the waterfront with the Hotel Portmeirion as a centrepiece, marking a site of activity and interest for those wishing to stay the night in this beautiful location. However, it is very expensive. Wherever you turn in the village, there is something to marvel at, including the Bristol Colonnade based in the picturesque gardens, the Gothic Pavilion and Hercules Hall. Whether you're interested in the ornate architecture and design features, or the tranquil settings of gardens and woodlands on the outskirts, the appeal of the village continues to hold throughout the decades, and it's hard not to see why it has recently been ranked the most romantic location in Britain. It certainly was a romantic location, because amongst all the fat American tourists, we stumbled across a wedding. The village is also home to the Roundhouse, which is the cottage used in that spy series I mentioned earlier, The Prisoner. The cottage is where the character number 6 lived, and is now being used as a memorabilia shop, an expensive one. Well worth a visit for anyone who is a fan of the show. I've never watched it. The attractive buildings and the charming vista have made the village a top destination for other films such as Doctor Who and Citizen Smith, and unfortunately Cold Feet. On the outskirts of the village, but within the Portmeirion estate, lies Castell Dudraith, probably pronounced that wrong, an impressive mansion which has been built on the site of the remains of a medieval castle, known by the same name. The building with its Gothic facade and imposing crenellations interested the man with many names greatly, and in 1931 he purchased the mansion with the ambition to turn it into a hotel. The building had originally belonged to a Victorian Member of Parliament, Sir Osmond Williams, the first Baronet, who also happened to be the uncle of the architect with many names, keeping it in the family. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, when we all joined the war, we didn't have to. All the other plans were halted until later on. Fortunately, the idea had not been forgotten, and with the help of funding from a variety of sources, in 2001, Castel du Drafe began operating as a hotel and restaurant, fulfilling the original ambitions. It's not all colourful houses and ponds, there's also a load of woodland around as well, which frames the estate in a large expanse covering 10 hectares of land, sprawling with a range of exotic plants filling the space with splashes of colour and texture. Christ, who wrote this? Inspired by the original garden designer George Henry Catton Hay, another man with too many names, but apparently he was an authority on gardening. So what can we take from this place? It was the brainchild of one white man with admittedly a lot of money. His ideas in architecture and design have continued to be a main source of attraction for many visitors who can marvel at the feeling of being transported to another country whilst still being in Wales. So if you've got time to spare this summer and you can't go abroad, or you're simply not allowed to because, well, you know why, then take yourself off to Wales, go up some mountains, perhaps walk, don't take the train, and go to Portmeirion and pretend you're in Italy instead. Until next time, ta-ta for now.